Commander Zekthar stood on the observation deck of Council Station Meridian, watching the human delegation arrive. His scales rippled with barely concealed amusement. 50 years the humans had been part of the Galactic Council, and they still acted like excited children at every diplomatic gathering. They were clever, he admitted. Good engineers. Excellent traders. But warriors? The thought made his throat sac vibrate with laughter. He had studied humans extensively during his assignment as military observer. They were small, fragile things without natural armor or claws. Their homeworld had produced them soft, with thin skin that tore easily and bones that broke under modest pressure. The Kresh Empire, his people, had conquered 17 star systems with their natural strength alone. Humans had barely managed to colonize 6 worlds in the same time frame. Kyle Bennett, the human liaison officer, approached with that strange expression they called a smile. Zekthar had learned it meant friendliness, though showing teeth seemed more like a threat display to him. "Commander Zekthar, good to see you," Kyle said, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture. Zekthar touched it briefly, careful not to grip too hard. Humans were so delicate. "Liaison Bennett, I trust your journey was pleasant?" "As pleasant as 3 weeks in hyperspace can be," Kyle replied with a laugh. "Any news from the frontier?" Zekthar's eyes narrowed. The human colonies in the outer reaches had been reporting strange sensor readings near Kresh space. Nothing definite, but enough to make the humans nervous. Good. They should be nervous. Across the station, Admiral Victoria Price watched the exchange through the window of the human embassy section. She was older than most human military officers Zekthar had observed, with gray streaks in her dark hair. Humans aged quickly, another sign of their fragility, yet something in her eyes made him uncomfortable whenever they met. It was like looking at a predator pretending to be prey. "The council meeting begins in 1 hour, Zekthar said. "Will Ambassador Martinez be attending?" "He will," Kyle confirmed. "Though I doubt it will be productive. The council hasn't taken our security concerns seriously for months. Perhaps because your concerns are unfounded," Zekthar suggested. "The Kresh Empire has no interest in your small colonies." Kyle's smile didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "I hope you're right, Commander." 3 days later, Zekthar's communicator screamed to life. The Kresh Third Fleet had launched a full assault on 3 human colony worlds. New Helena, Bridgeport, and Sanctuary fell within hours. Orbital bombardment destroyed the settlements before the colonists could evacuate. 20,000 humans died in the first strike. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Zekthar attended as required, though he already knew the outcome. The Council wouldn't intervene. They never did in conflicts involving minor species. Ambassador Paul Martinez stood before the assembled delegates, his face carved from stone. "The Kresh Empire has committed an unprovoked act of war against human civilians. We demand immediate council intervention and sanctions." The Vath Collective's representative, a massive insectoid creature, clicked its mandibles dismissively. The humans should have defended their territories better. "The council does not involve itself in every border skirmish." 20,000 dead is not a skirmish," Martinez said quietly. The Joran hegemony's crystalline ambassador chimed in, its voice like breaking glass. "Your species lacks the military strength to maintain such distant colonies. This is a natural correction." Zekthar watched Kyle Bennett's hands clench into fists. The human's face remained calm, but his body language screamed rage. Interesting. Perhaps humans had more fire in them than he thought, but fire without strength was just smoke. "Then humanity will handle this matter ourselves," Martinez said. He gathered his documents and walked out. Kyle and the other human delegates followed. That night, Zekthar intercepted a transmission from Earth. It was simple, direct, and sent on every human frequency simultaneously. He ran it through the translation matrix 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. "The old protocols are lifted. Full mobilization authorized. Release the hidden fleet, activate all reserves. Authorization code. Ragnarok protocol initiated." Zekthar deleted the intercept from his official logs. Probably just human panic, he thought. Empty threats from a species that had never shown any real military capability. The hidden fleet was likely a handful of converted cargo vessels. Humans were good at building things, but they had no warrior tradition, no experience with real warfare. Captain Greg Holland received the transmission aboard the Freedom's Edge in the asteroid belt beyond Mars. He had been waiting for this message for 30 years. His crew had been waiting. Every human ship in the secret fleet had been waiting. All hands battle stations, Greg said calmly. Engineering, bring the weapons systems online. Navigation, plot a course to intercept the Kresh Third Fleet. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Amy Carter, looked up from her console. Her fingers danced across controls that had been locked behind encryption for decades. Sir, all weapon systems are responding. Railguns charging, plasma torpedoes armed, nuclear-pumped lasers ready, stealth systems engaged. How long until we reach the Kresh fleet? 48 hours at maximum burn, sir. Greg nodded. Signal the rest of Wolfpack 7. We move in formation. Complete communication silence until engagement. In the deep ocean trenches of Earth, Commander Nick Taylor sat in a vessel that had never seen sunlight. Around him, 300 similar craft waited in the dark. They had been built in secret, tested in secret, and crewed by people who officially didn't exist. Receiving mobilization order, his communications officer reported. We are clear to deploy. Take us up, Nick said. Nice and slow. Let's not spook any satellites on the way out. The submarine-style spacecraft rose through the water, its adaptive camouflage making it nearly invisible. By the time it breached the surface and climbed toward orbit, Earth sensor networks had been programmed to ignore it entirely. On Mars, Major Kate Sullivan watched her Marines load into assault ships. They weren't wearing their dress uniforms anymore. They wore armor that had been hidden in storage for 50 years. Armor designed for war, not peacekeeping. Each soldier carried weapons that would make the Galactic Council's security forces look like children with toys. Think they'll be surprised? One of her sergeants asked. Kate checked her rifle's charge indicator. I think they're going to learn why humanity stopped fighting itself. We didn't become peaceful. We just ran out of worthy opponents. Back on Council Station Meridian, Kyle Bennett stood in his quarters staring at Earth through the window. He had played the role of friendly diplomat for 12 years. He had smiled and joked and let aliens like Zekthar think humans were soft. It had been the hardest mission of his life. His communicator chimed. Admiral Price's voice came through. Kyle, you're being recalled to the Freedom's Edge. Your diplomatic assignment is over. Understood, Admiral. What should I tell the Council? Tell them nothing. Let them figure it out themselves. Kyle allowed himself a real smile, not the diplomatic mask he had worn for so long. It will be good to stop pretending. Zekthar noticed the human embassy section emptying over the next day. Ships arrived and departed with unusual frequency. When he tried to contact Kyle Bennett, he discovered the liaison officer had left the station without filing departure notices. Something cold settled in Zekthar's stomach. He pulled up the intelligence reports on human military capabilities. They were thin, mostly observations of small patrol craft and orbital defense stations. Nothing that could threaten a Kresh battle fleet, but the way Kyle had smiled before leaving bothered him. It was the same expression Admiral Price always wore. Like they knew something he didn't. He tried to push the concern aside. The Kresh Third Fleet was already moving deeper into human space, preparing to strike the next set of colonies. The humans would surrender soon enough. They had no choice. In the darkness between stars, 300 human warships moved silently toward their targets. Ships that had been built in the shadows of gas giants in asteroid hollows, in places the galaxy had never thought to look. Each one carried weapons designed not for defense but for total warfare. Admiral Victoria Price sat in her command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching the tactical display. Red icons showed the Kresh fleet. Blue icons, still hidden from enemy sensors, showed the human response. All units report ready, her aide informed her. Victoria looked at the countdown timer, 41 hours until contact. She thought about the 20,000 colonists who had died. She thought about the Council's dismissal. She thought about 50 years of playing weak while building an arsenal in secret. Send one more message to the Kresh fleet, she said. Tell them they have 40 hours to withdraw from human space. They won't listen, Admiral. I know. But later, when they ask why we didn't warn them, I want that message on record. We tried diplomacy. They chose war. She pressed a button on her console, opening a channel to every human military installation in the solar system. This is Admiral Price. For 50 years we have hidden our true strength. For 50 years we have prepared for this day. The galaxy thinks we are traitors and engineers. They think we are weak. They are about to learn the truth. Operation Thunderstrike is... The Kresh Third Fleet moved through space like a predator that had never known fear. 200 warships arranged in the traditional battle formation, their hulls gleaming with the pride of an empire that had never lost a war. Fleetmaster Corvin stood on his command deck, reviewing the next targets. The humans had gone silent after losing their first colonies, probably preparing their surrender. Zekthar stood beside him, officially as an observer but privately feeling increasingly uneasy. The humans had ignored their warning to withdraw. No counter-proposal, no desperate plea for negotiations, just silence. That wasn't how prey species behaved. Sensors detect nothing in the target system, the tactical officer reported. The human colony of New Terra appears undefended. Excellent, Corvin said. Prepare orbital bombardment. We will finish this quickly and move to the next system. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Terra system. For a moment, everything seemed quiet. Then the darkness exploded with light. Railgun projectiles accelerated to a fraction of light speed, tore through the Kresh formation. 3 warships simply ceased to exist, their shields overwhelmed before they could react. 4 more took critical damage, atmosphere venting into space. Where are they? Corvin roared. Find them! The tactical display lit up with red icons. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids, from the shadows of moons, from positions that suggested they had been waiting for days. They weren't in formation. They scattered across the system like a pack of wolves surrounding prey. Evasive maneuvers, Corvin ordered. Return fire. But the human ships weren't where the Kresh targeting computers expected them to be. They moved with patterns that made no tactical sense, breaking every rule of proper naval warfare. 1 ship would engage, draw fire, then retreat while 3 others struck from different angles. They coordinated without apparent communication, flowing like water around the Kresh formation. The Freedom's Edge swept through the Kresh line, its railguns hammering at their flanks. Captain Greg Holland stood calmly on his bridge while explosions lit up the viewscreen. This was what his ship had been built for. Not patrols, not escorts, war. Target their command carrier, Greg ordered. Amy, give me a firing solution. Lieutenant Amy Carter's fingers flew across her console. Sir, their shields are strongest at the front. But if we come in at 30 degrees vertical and hit them with plasma torpedoes right after the railgun barrage, we can punch through their lateral defenses. Do it. The Freedom's Edge rolled, its artificial gravity keeping the crew stable, while the ship performed maneuvers that would have killed the crew of any Kresh vessel. The railguns fired first, forcing the command carrier to rotate its shields. A second later, 3 plasma torpedoes hit the exposed section. The carrier's hull breached, secondary explosions rippling along its spine. Corvin clutched his command chair as his ship shuddered. Impossible. Their technology is inferior. They should not be able to damage us. Zekthar stared at the tactical display with growing horror. The human ships were using weapons the Council had never seen before. Their tactics made no sense according to standard military doctrine, which was exactly why they worked. The Kresh battle computers couldn't predict moves that violated all conventional strategy. We need to retreat, Zekthar said quietly. We outnumber them 3-1, Corvin snapped. We do not retreat from humans. A new wave of human ships appeared, these ones smaller and faster. Fighter craft that moved with impossible agility, dodging point defense fire that should have vaporized them. They swarmed around Kresh destroyers like insects, targeting sensor arrays and weapon systems with precision that suggested intimate knowledge of Kresh ship design. Lieutenant Sophie Grant pulled 6 Gs in a turn that pushed her to the edge of consciousness. Her fighter screamed around a Kresh battlecruiser. Her targeting computer locked on their communications array. She squeezed the trigger. Laser fire cut through the array like a hot knife through flesh. Target destroyed, she reported, moving to the next one. Her wingman, a pilot named Danny Ross, flanked her. Soph, you seeing what I'm seeing? They can't track us. It's like fighting blind people. Their sensors are good, Sophie replied, but they're designed to track ships moving in predictable patterns. We're not predictable. She dove toward the battlecruiser's engine section, her fighter's computer screaming warnings about proximity. She ignored it. At the last second, she released a torpedo and pulled up so hard her vision grayed. The torpedo hit the engine manifold. The battlecruiser's power systems cascaded into failure. On the surface of New Terra, Major Kate Sullivan watched the space battle through her tactical display. The colonists had been evacuated to underground shelters days ago. Human intelligence had known the Kresh were coming. They had prepared. Major Kresh landing craft incoming, her sergeant reported. Looks like they're trying to take the colony anyway. Kate smiled behind her helmet. Let them land. Everyone to positions. The Kresh dropships descended through the atmosphere, confident that human ground forces would be as weak as their reputation suggested. The first wave landed near the main settlement. 200 Kresh warriors emerged, their natural armor gleaming, their claws ready for combat. They made it 50 meters before the mines detonated. The Kresh formation scattered, seeking cover. They found buildings that appeared abandoned. They entered carefully, weapons ready. The buildings exploded. Human forces had booby-trapped everything, turning the entire settlement into a killing field. Kate's Marines hit them from 3 sides. Their weapons punched through Kresh armor that was supposed to be impenetrable. Armor-piercing rounds designed specifically for heavy targets, tested in secret for decades. The Kresh warriors were strong, but strength meant nothing against bullets that traveled faster than sound. Push them back to the landing zone, Kate ordered. Don't let them regroup. The battle lasted 30 minutes. When it ended, not a single Kresh warrior had made it back to their dropships. In orbit, the Freedom's Edge moved through the debris field that had been a Kresh fleet. 40 enemy ships destroyed or disabled, 15 more fleeing the system. The human forces had lost 3 ships with minimal casualties. It wasn't even a battle. It was a demonstration. Greg Holland opened a channel to all human ships. Well done. Now we chase them. I want the survivors to reach their empire. I want them to tell everyone what happened here. Colonel Jake Morrison materialized on a Kresh destroyer, his stealth suit deactivating. His team of Ghost Division commandos spread through the ship like smoke, their movements silent and lethal. They weren't there to kill the crew. They had a different mission. Jake reached the ship's data core and inserted a small device. It began downloading everything: ship designs, fleet movements, military protocols, communication encryption. Within 5 minutes, he had more intelligence on the Kresh military than the Galactic Council had gathered in a century. Data acquired, he whispered into his comm, setting charges and moving to extraction. His team vanished as quietly as they had arrived. 2 minutes later, the destroyer's reactor went critical. The ship broke apart, leaving no evidence of the intrusion. Back at Council Station Meridian, news of the battle spread like fire. The council convened an emergency session, confusion and fear replacing their usual arrogance. The Vath Collective's representative demanded explanations. Where did the humans get such weapons? It clicked. They were supposed to be a minor species. The Joran ambassador's crystalline structure flickered with agitation. They have been hiding their capabilities. They have been lying to the council. Ambassador Paul Martinez appeared via hologram, his expression neutral. We never lied. You never asked what we were capable of. You assumed we were weak because we chose not to demonstrate our strength. That was your mistake, not our deception. This is unacceptable, the Vath representative said. The council must regulate human military expansion. The council refused to help when we were attacked, Paul replied coldly. You have no authority over our military decisions now. We will defend ourselves with whatever force is necessary. The hologram disconnected. The council chamber erupted in argument. Species that had ignored humanity for 50 years now scrambled to understand what they were facing. Zekathar sat in his quarters, writing a report he knew his superiors wouldn't believe. The humans hadn't just defeated the Kresh Third Fleet, they had made it look easy. Their tactics were sophisticated, their weapons advanced, their coordination flawless. This wasn't a military they had built in a few weeks. This was a war machine that had been waiting, hidden for decades. He accessed human historical databases, something he had never bothered to do before. What he found made his blood run cold. The humans had been fighting wars for their entire existence, not border skirmishes. Total wars, wars that killed millions, wars that had nearly destroyed their own species. They had created weapons capable of sterilizing their entire planet, and had actually used them on each other. The humans who smiled and traded and built stations weren't peaceful by nature. They were peaceful by choice. They had learned to control their violence, but they had never forgotten how to unleash it. A communication arrived from the Kresh High Command. The Third Fleet had been destroyed. Fleet Master Corvin was dead. Of the 200, The Vath collective fleet emerged from hyperspace near the human mining colonies of the asteroid belt. 300 warships, their insectoid design bristling with bioorganic weapons that had conquered 12 species. Behind them came the Joran hegemony's crystalline vessels, 200 strong, their energy weapons capable of carving planets in half. Together they represented the greatest military force assembled in the galaxy in a century. Queen Commander Zixra of the Vath chittered with satisfaction. The humans had defeated the Kresh through surprise and deception, but against two coordinated fleets their tricks would fail. The collective would take the resource-rich asteroid belt and the Joran would claim the inner colonies. Humanity would be divided and conquered. "Deploy forward screen," she ordered. "Advance in battle formation. Expect human resistance, but do not let them scatter our forces as they did the Kresh." The Allied fleets moved forward in a disciplined wall of firepower. They had studied the Battle of Nuterra. They would not be caught unprepared. Then the asteroids began to move. Admiral Marcus Flynn stood in the command center of the hidden fleet's flagship, the Valiant, buried deep inside what sensors had always shown as a simple mining asteroid. Around him, 300 similar asteroids shed their camouflage, revealing weapons platforms that had been disguised for 30 years. "All stations, full power," Marcus ordered. "Let them see what we really built out here." The asteroids didn't just have weapons. They were weapons. Mass drivers the size of buildings hurled chunks of rock accelerated to devastating speeds. Nuclear missiles erupted from hidden silos. Laser arrays that had been disguised as mining equipment focused their combined power on enemy shields. The Vath forward screen simply vanished, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of fire. 20 ships destroyed in the first 30 seconds. 30 more damaged beyond combat effectiveness. Impossible, Zixra hissed. Those were mining colonies. Our intelligence showed no military installations. Her tactical officers' antennae quivered with fear. "Queen Commander, the entire asteroid belt appears to be armed. We are detecting weapon signatures from hundreds of locations." Admiral Victoria Price watched from Earth, a slight smile on her face. The asteroids had been humanity's first line of defense, disguised as commercial operations. The galaxy had watched humans mine them for decades, never suspecting that each mining laser could be repurposed. Each cargo hauler could carry missiles. Each facility could become a fortress. "Deploy the mobile fleet," she ordered. From the dark side of Mars, Admiral Marcus Flynn led his ships into battle. These weren't the light raiders that had fought at Nuterra. These were capital ships, dreadnoughts built in orbital yards hidden behind Jupiter's radiation belts. Each one carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet. The Valiant's weapons opened fire. Railgun rounds tore through Vath bioarmor. Plasma torpedoes melted Joran crystal matrices. Nuclear-pumped lasers carved through shields that had been thought impenetrable. On Earth, Lieutenant Sophie Grant climbed into her fighter for the second time in a week. Around her, 300 other pilots prepared for launch. They had trained for this mission their entire lives, flying patterns that human bodies barely survived, pushing aircraft to performance levels that defied alien engineering. "All wings form up," she commanded. "We're hitting the Joran hegemony's command ship. Target their shield generators first, then their weapon arrays." Her fighter launched from a hidden base in Nevada, accelerating to orbital velocity in seconds. The G-forces would have killed most alien species. Sophie breathed through it, her body conditioned by years of training. Humans had been flying fighters for centuries. They had learned to become one with their machines. The fighter wings hit the Joran fleet like a swarm of angry hornets. They moved in 3 dimensions simultaneously, using maneuvers that alien pilots couldn't follow. Sophie's targeting computer locked onto a massive crystalline battleship. She dove toward it, weapons firing in precise bursts. "Target their resonance points," she called to her wing. "Hit them where the crystal structures meet." The fighters concentrated their fire on the battleship's structural weak points. The Joran had never considered that their beautiful crystalline ships had inherent vulnerabilities. The humans had studied them for years, running simulations, finding every flaw. The battleship shattered like glass, fragments spinning off into space. On the ground, Colonel Alan Brooks waited with his Marines on the human colony of New Pittsburgh. Intelligence reported that Vath ground forces were preparing to land, confident that they could overwhelm human defenses through sheer numbers. The Vath were strong fighters, with natural armor and venomous mandibles. They had never lost a ground battle. Alan checked his weapon, a modified rifle that fired armor-piercing rounds designed specifically to penetrate Vath carapaces. His troops wore powered armor that amplified their strength and speed. The Vath might be naturally dangerous, but humans had learned to enhance themselves with technology. "Let them land," Alan said quietly. "We'll show them what happens when you invade a human world." The Vath dropships descended and 2,000 warriors emerged. They were met by a barrage of artillery fire that turned the landing zone into hell. The Vath formation broke, seeking cover in the surrounding forest. The forest was full of human soldiers who had been waiting in camouflage positions for hours. The Vath were ambushed from every direction. Mines detonated under their feet. Snipers picked off their leaders. Drones tracked their movements and called in precision strikes. "They fight like cowards," one Vath warrior chittered before a bullet ended his complaint. Alan smiled grimly. Humans didn't fight for honor. They fought to win. In space, Commander Beth Rogers watched the battle from her stealth ship, invisible to alien sensors. Her mission was intelligence gathering, but she was witnessing something extraordinary. The humans weren't just winning. They were dominating. The Vath and Joran fleets had come expecting a battle. Instead, they were being systematically dismantled. Human forces struck from multiple directions, coordinating their attacks with precision that suggested a level of military communication the aliens couldn't match. Beth accessed the data her network had been collecting. For 50 years, human intelligence operatives had infiltrated every major alien government. They knew fleet positions, military protocols, command structures. The humans had been preparing for this war since the day they made first contact with the galaxy. "Intelligence to command," she transmitted. "The Vath Reserve Fleet is moving to reinforce. Sending coordinates now." Admiral Marcus Flynn received the data and smiled. The Vath thought they were being clever, keeping reserves hidden, but human intelligence had spotted them hours ago. "Deploy Wolfpack 3, he ordered. "Intercept and destroy." 30 human destroyers broke from the main battle, moving to cut off the Vath reinforcements. They used the moon's gravity well to slingshot themselves into position, a maneuver that required calculations most species couldn't perform in real time. Human computers, designed by a species that had been launching spacecraft for centuries, handled it effortlessly. The Vath Reserve Fleet never saw them coming. Zekthar watched the battle from a monitoring station, his scales pale with shock. 3 galactic powers had converged on humanity, and all 3 were losing. The humans fought with a coordination that suggested years of planning. Their weapons were advanced beyond anything the Council had suspected. Their tactics were ruthless and effective, but what terrified him most was the realization that the humans were still holding back. He had accessed classified reports studying their history. They had weapons they weren't using. Nuclear warheads that could crack planets, biological weapons that could exterminate species, chemical agents that could poison atmospheres. They were winning without using their worst weapons. They were sending a message. This wasn't even their full strength. Queen Commander Zixra's command ship shuddered under sustained fire. Half her fleet was gone. The Joran were faring no better. The Crystalline Alliance was fracturing as each species tried to save itself. "Withdraw," she ordered, her pride broken. "All ships retreat to hyperspace coordinates." But the humans weren't letting them go easily. They pursued the fleeing ships, destroying stragglers, capturing damaged vessels. They wanted prisoners. They wanted the galaxy to hear what happened here. Admiral Victoria Price watched the enemy fleet scatter. The Battle of Sol had lasted 6 hours. 3 galactic powers had attacked humanity's home system with overwhelming force. They were leaving with less than half their ships, their military might shattered. "Cease pursuit at the heliopause," she ordered. "Let them run. Let them tell everyone what they saw." Kyle Bennett, now reinstated as a military officer aboard the Freedom's Edge, helped process the captured alien personnel. They were confused, terrified. They had come expecting to fight a minor species. Instead, they had encountered a military machine that operated with efficiency they couldn't comprehend. "Why did you hide this?" one Joran prisoner asked, its crystalline structure flickering with distress. "Why pretend to be weak?" Kyle looked at the alien with cold eyes. "We weren't pretending to be weak. We were trying to avoid war. You mistook our restraint for inability. That was your error." Across the galaxy, the news spread faster than light. Humanity had... The galaxy reeled from humanity's victories, but pride and fear are dangerous motivators. Within 2 weeks of the Battle of Sol, The three defeated powers did something unprecedented. They formed an alliance. The Kresh Empire, Vath Collective, and Joran Hegemony set aside centuries of rivalry to face a common threat. They called themselves the United Front, and they were preparing for total war. General Ryan Cooper sat in a bunker complex beneath Cheyenne Mountain, reviewing intelligence reports. He was in charge of humanity's most classified projects, the weapon systems that even most human military personnel didn't know existed. Now, as the United Front mobilized 5,000 warships for a final assault, it was time to reveal what humanity had really been building. "How long until they reach our space?" he asked. 6 days, his aide replied. "They're coming with everything they have. Our projections show they'll hit Earth directly. They want to end this war by destroying our homeworld." Ryan nodded slowly. "Then we end it first. Activate Project Prometheus. Release the autonomous combat systems." Zekthar had been returned to Kresh space as part of a prisoner exchange, but he couldn't shake the horror of what he had witnessed. He tried to warn the High Command that attacking humanity again was suicide, but they wouldn't listen. The Alliance gave them confidence. 5,000 ships against humanity's few hundred. The numbers favored the United Front. "You don't understand," Zekthar pleaded with the War Council. "The humans have been preparing for this for longer than we realize. Everything we know about them is wrong." "Then help us learn the truth," the Supreme Commander said. "Access their public databases. Study their history. Tell us what we're really facing." Zekthar spent 3 days diving into human records, and what he found broke something inside him. The humans had fought 2 global wars that killed hundreds of millions. They had created nuclear weapons and used them on their own cities. They had developed chemical agents that could kill millions in hours. They had engineered diseases as weapons. They had armed satellites in orbit and pointed them at themselves. The humans hadn't been hiding their military capability from the galaxy. They had been hiding it from themselves, trying to forget what they were capable of. For 50 years, they had maintained a peaceful facade, desperately hoping they could evolve beyond their violent nature. The galaxy had shattered that hope. "We're not fighting a species," Zekthar reported to the Council. "We're fighting a nightmare that learned to smile. Every human carries the genetic memory of thousands of years of warfare. They have killed billions of their own kind, perfecting the art of destruction. When they entered the galaxy, they were trying to escape their past. We forced them to embrace it again." The Supreme Commander's scales darkened. "Are you saying we cannot defeat them?" "I'm saying we shouldn't try, because if we push them far enough, they will use weapons that will make everything we've seen look like children playing with toys." Dr. Helen Pierce stood in a biological research facility on Europa, preparing data files that she hoped would never need to be transmitted. Her work was classified beyond top secret. She had spent 20 years developing countermeasures for every known alien biological system, not vaccines, weapons. "Dr. Pierce, you've been authorized to release the xenobiological warfare data," her assistant said nervously. "Command wants it ready as a contingency." Helen felt sick. She had studied Kresh physiology, Vath biology, Joran energy matrices. She knew how to kill each species efficiently. She had engineered pathogens that would spread through their populations, toxins that would target their specific biochemistry, nanoweapons that would dismantle their cellular structure. She had created these horrors hoping they would remain theoretical deterrents. Now they might have to be deployed. "Prepare the data," she said quietly, "but pray we don't have to use it." Captain Troy Jensen commanded the Warhammer, an experimental vessel that officially didn't exist. Its engines used zero-point energy extraction, technology that violated several laws of physics according to current galactic understanding. Its weapons included gravity manipulators that could crush ships like tin cans, and directed energy beams that could cut through planetary crust. "Captain, we're receiving deployment orders," his tactical officer reported. "We're authorized to reveal our full capabilities." Troy looked at his crew. They had trained on this ship for 5 years, learning to operate technology that was decades ahead of anything the galaxy used. The Warhammer wasn't just advanced. It was a glimpse of humanity's technological ceiling, and that ceiling was much higher than anyone suspected. "Take us to the front line," he ordered. "It's time to show them what humanity builds when we stop playing nice." Major Claire Evans ran the Psychological Operations Division, and her mission was to break enemy morale without firing a shot. She had compiled footage of human warfare throughout history, the trenches of the First World War, The atomic bombings of the second, the carpet bombings that leveled entire cities, the chemical weapons that turned battlefields into toxic waste. She broadcast it all on every frequency, ensuring the United Front forces saw exactly what humans had done to each other. The message was clear. If humans were willing to do this to themselves, what would they do to alien invaders? The response was immediate. Desertion rates in the United Front fleet spiked. Ships began questioning their orders. The alliance started to crack as individual species reconsidered the wisdom of attacking a species that had survived its own worst weapons. Admiral Victoria Price received reports of the enemy's wavering resolve, but she couldn't count on it. The United Front might collapse, or they might commit to one final desperate assault. She had to be ready for both outcomes. Status on the defensive grid? She asked. The moon has been converted to a weapons platform, her aide reported. Mars is fully armed. The asteroid belt has doubled its firepower. Every satellite in Earth orbit has been militarized. If they reach our system, they'll face firepower equivalent to 1,000 battleships. Victoria nodded. Humanity had turned their entire solar system into a fortress. Every rock, every station, every piece of space debris could become a weapon. The United Front would have to fight past layers of defense that would bleed them dry before they ever reached Earth. Kyle Bennett stood on the bridge of the Freedom's Edge, now serving as first officer under Captain Greg Holland. The ship had been upgraded with new weapons from the classified programs. Experimental railguns that could punch through any known shield, plasma weapons that could melt through armor like butter, stealth systems that made them invisible to every known sensor. Kyle, what do you think they'll do? Greg asked. Will they back down? Pride is a powerful thing, Kyle replied. They've convinced themselves that their combined strength can overcome us. They don't want to believe they're outmatched. Then we'll have to show them. The United Front fleet assembled at the edge of human space, 5,000 ships representing the combined military might of 3 galactic empires. They had a plan, a simultaneous assault on multiple human colonies, forcing the defenders to spread thin, then a concentrated thrust toward Earth itself. It was a good plan. Against any other species, it would have worked. General Ryan Cooper activated Protocol Ragnarok, and the galaxy learned what humanity had built in the deepest secrecy. Autonomous combat drones, thousands of them, emerged from hidden facilities across human space. They were self-replicating, self-repairing, powered by miniature fusion reactors. Each one carried weapons that could destroy ships 10 times their size. The drones moved like a swarm, overwhelming enemy sensors and weapon systems through sheer numbers. They didn't need human operators. They had been programmed with centuries of tactical data, learning from every war humanity had ever fought. They were the perfect soldiers, tireless, fearless, and utterly ruthless. The United Front's advance force encountered them near the outer colonies and lost 100 ships in the first hour. The drones adapted to every counter-tactic, learning and evolving in real time. They were artificial intelligence weaponized, and they were unstoppable. Recall the drones, Victoria ordered after watching the carnage. We've made our point, but she kept them active. A hovering threat that reminded the United Front what humanity could unleash if pushed further. Captain Troy Jensen brought the Warhammer into the battle, and the United Front learned that human technology had surpassed theirs by generations. The experimental ship moved faster than anything they had seen, accelerated by principles they didn't understand. Its weapons carved through formations like a knife through paper. Troy targeted the largest Kresh battleship and fired the gravity manipulator. Space itself twisted around the enemy vessel, crushing it into a sphere of compressed metal and screaming crew. The surrounding ships scattered in terror. This is Captain Jensen of the Warhammer to all United Front vessels, he broadcast. This is one experimental ship. We have 12 more. Withdraw now or we deploy the entire experimental fleet. It was a bluff. They only had 3 experimental ships, but the enemy didn't know that, and their morale was already fracturing. Zekthar watched the battle reports with despair. The humans were winning without using their worst weapons. They were demonstrating restraint, showing that they could destroy the United Front completely, but the United Front's final assault came 3 months after their surrender negotiations collapsed. Pride, desperation, and fear drove them to one last gamble, a direct strike on Earth itself. Every remaining warship, every reserve unit, every asset they could scrape together was thrown into a massive fleet. 4,000 ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of humanity's solar system, prepared to fight to the last vessel. They had studied human tactics, adapted their strategies, coordinated their approach. They believed this time would be different. They were wrong. The moment the United Front fleet entered the solar system, they realized they had sailed into a trap. The entire system lit up with weapon signatures. Not just ships and stations, but everything. Asteroids revealed themselves as fortresses. Ice comets concealed missile batteries. What they thought was empty space was actually filled with mines, drones, and automated defense platforms. Earth's solar system wasn't a star system with some defenses. It was a weapon that happened to have planets in it. Kyle Bennett stood on the bridge of the Freedom's Edge, positioned near Mars. Around him, the entire human fleet assembled for the final confrontation. Every ship they had built, every pilot they had trained, every weapon they had designed. This was humanity's full strength revealed at last. "They're really doing this," Captain Greg Holland said with something like admiration. "They know they'll lose, but they're coming anyway." "Cornered animals are dangerous," Kyle replied. "But so are humans defending their home." Admiral Victoria Price coordinated the defense from her command center on Earth, watching tactical displays that showed the approaching enemy fleet and the layers of human defenses. She felt a strange mixture of sadness and determination. She had hoped the galaxy would learn without forcing humanity to demonstrate total war. That hope was dead now. "All units, weapons free," she ordered. "Show them what happens when you attack Earth." The battle began with the asteroid belt. Hundreds of hidden fortresses opened fire simultaneously, filling space with railgun projectiles, missiles, and energy beams. The United Front's forward screen evaporated under the barrage. Ships that survived the first wave found themselves pursued by autonomous drones that had been waiting in the asteroid field for months. Queen Commander Zixra of the Vath watched her fleet take horrific casualties before they even reached the inner planets. "Push through," she ordered. "We committed to this course. We end it here." The fleet pressed forward, losing ships with every kilometer. They reached Mars and encountered Admiral Marcus Flynn's mobile fleet. The Valiant and 300 capital ships formed a wall of steel between the invaders and Earth. "Fire everything," Marcus ordered. The human capital ships unleashed firepower that made the earlier battles look like skirmishes. These were the dreadnoughts humanity had been building in secret, armed with every weapon they could design. They didn't maneuver elegantly. They didn't need to. They were mobile fortresses designed to sit in space and destroy everything in range. The United Front tried to bypass them, but human fighter wings cut off every approach. Lieutenant Sophie Grant led her squadron through the chaos, her pilots executing maneuvers that pushed human bodies to their absolute limits. She targeted enemy command ships, disrupting their coordination, forcing them into reactive tactics instead of planned strategy. "Red Wing, form up on me," she called. "We're hitting their flagship." 20 fighters dove toward the massive Kresh dreadnought at the center of the enemy formation. Point defense fire filled space around them, but they wove through it like they were dancing. Sophie lined up her targeting computer and fired every weapon she had at the dreadnought's bridge. The armored section cracked, atmosphere venting, command systems failing. The Kresh fleet's coordination collapsed as their flagship went dark. On the ground at human military bases across Earth, Major Kate Sullivan watched the space battle through her tactical display. Her Marines were on standby in case any enemy forces made it to the surface. She didn't think they would, but if they did, Earth's defenders were ready. "Major, we're detecting enemy landing craft attempting atmospheric entry," her sergeant reported. "Looks like a desperation move. They're going to try to hit our command centers." Kate smiled coldly behind her helmet. "Let them come. They want to see Earth? We'll give them a tour of hell." The Vath dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere, targeted by every ground-based weapon system on the planet. Most were destroyed before landing. The few that made it down disgorged their warriors into a world that had been preparing for invasion for decades. Urban areas had been evacuated. Every building was booby-trapped. Every street was a kill zone. The Vath warriors found themselves fighting not just human soldiers, but an entire planet that had been turned into a weapon. Kate's Marines hit them from fortified positions, using the terrain and infrastructure to their advantage. The aliens were strong and fierce, but they were fighting on humanity's homeworld. They had no chance. The battle lasted 4 hours and ended with every single Vath landing force eliminated. In space, Commander Beth Rogers watched from her stealth ship as the United Front's fleet disintegrated. Her intelligence network had been feeding human commanders enemy positions and movements in real time. The aliens never had a chance to coordinate or regroup. Every move they made, humanity countered before they could complete it. Intelligence to all units, she transmitted. Enemy command structure has broken down. They're fighting as individual ships now. Recommend pursuit and capture operations. Captain Troy Jensen brought the Warhammer into the heart of the enemy formation. The experimental ship's gravity weapons created zones of twisted space that crushed entire squadrons. Its point-to-point translation systems let it appear and disappear like a ghost, striking from impossible angles. "This is the Warhammer to all enemy vessels," Troy broadcast. "You have lost. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Continued resistance will result in your destruction." Some ships complied. Others tried to fight. The ones that fought died. Colonel Jake Morrison and his Ghost Division commandos materialized on the Joran Hegemony's command vessel, moving through its crystalline corridors like smoke. They weren't there to kill. They were there to capture the Joran leadership alive. Humanity wanted to put the architects of this war on trial. Jake reached the command chamber and found the Joran admiral attempting to activate the ship's self-destruct. He moved faster, his augmented reflexes putting him next to the alien before it could complete the sequence. "You're coming with us," Jake said simply. "This war is over." Zekthar sat in his quarters on a damaged Kresh destroyer, writing what he knew would be his final report. The battle was lost. The United Front was destroyed. Humanity had defended their homeworld using only a fraction of their strength. They still had weapons they hadn't deployed, fleets they hadn't committed, capabilities they hadn't revealed. He had watched humans transform from peaceful traders to the galaxy's apex predators in a matter of months. No, that wasn't right. They had always been predators. They had just been pretending to be something else. He titled his report, "I Thought I Knew War," and transmitted it to every data network he could access. It was a warning to the galaxy. Humanity was not like other species. They had evolved in violence, refined destruction to an art form, and had nearly destroyed themselves learning how to kill. The galaxy had forced them to remember those lessons. The Battle of Sol ended with the complete defeat of the United Front. Of the 4,000 ships that attacked, fewer than 300 escaped. The rest were captured or destroyed. Humanity's losses were minimal. The solar system's defenses had worked exactly as designed. Admiral Victoria Price stood on the balcony of her command center, looking up at the sky as the last enemy ships fled the system. She felt no triumph, only exhaustion. They had won, but at what cost? Humanity had revealed itself as the galaxy's most dangerous military power. They could never go back to being the friendly traders they had pretended to be. "Admiral, the Galactic Council is requesting immediate negotiations," her aide reported. "They're prepared to accept all human demands." Victoria nodded slowly. "Tell them we'll talk. But on our terms, in our space, with our security. The days of the Council dictating to humanity are over." The galaxy watched the Battle of Sol through broadcasts that humans deliberately left unencrypted. Every species saw what happened when humanity was pushed too far. The message was clear. Never again would humans be dismissed or ignored. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council convened on Council Station Meridian, but this time, human warships surrounded it. Ambassador Paul Martinez walked into the chamber not as a supplicant, but as a conqueror showing mercy. "Humanity will accept the following terms," he announced. "We will have permanent seats on all council committees. Human military protocols will become the galactic standard. All species will submit their fleet compositions for human review. Any future conflicts will be mediated by human peacekeepers. These terms are not negotiable." The council accepted without debate. They had no choice. Admiral Marcus Flynn was appointed the first Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense, overseeing all military operations across known space. His first act was establishing military academies that taught human tactics,